Hey everybody, Scoutcrafter here again. It's Friday, TGIF. Made it through another week, and we're getting close to the holidays, right? You know, it's really kicking up at this time. So, want to get right into it. I usually don't talk about safety issues, but there's something happened the other day that I wanted to bring up because I feel responsible. I'm sure I pushed some of you to pick up maybe one of those 4.5-inch angle grinders, and it's a fantastic tool, but I just want to talk a little bit about a safety issue that you should know
Now,
about.
the tool I'm speaking of now is this. This is the angle grinder here. It's a 4.5-inch capacity angle grinder. Usually you'll see them where they're cut off about here. They have a barrel here that you grip onto. This one here is called the rat tail, or it has an extended handle that gives you a much better grip, much safer unit to use. But these have become super popular over the years, and rightly so. They're a fantastic tool. They have a multitude of different accessories that you can use. This is just a few of them. You know, you have a grinding dish, you have a cut-off wheel that will cut through almost any type of metal. You have a fiber wheel that you can surface condition some of your items. You have flap discs, which are sanding discs, and then you have a different array of wire type wheels. Some here like this, really heavy duty, great if you're cleaning up anvils, things like that, or like I was doing with that base plate the other day. But this is what I wanted to talk about here. This is a cupped wire brush. Now, it doesn't look ominous at all, but there are a couple accessories that go with this angle grinder that you have to be super careful with. One of them is that a chainsaw wood carving type accessory that is extremely dangerous because of the same principles that I'm going to talk about this one here. Now, I had an incident happen to me the other day when I was cleaning up the base plate of the drill press stand. What happened was I was using it like I would normally do. Now, I remember using this years and years ago when I first got an angle grinder. I bought the accessory kit that came with the cup, and I was cleaning up an anvil. And I remember it caught the edge and it did the same thing. So it was in the back of my mind, but you know, I have to bring this to your attention if you ever use it, especially some of you guys out there in the warmer weather, and I'll tell you why. Now, I was using this like this here, you know, like now, whenever you're using an angle grinder with anything, wire brush, cut brush, you always want to use the very ends here, this end here. So in other words, when you're addressing the work, it should be tilted so that only this end, you never come down to a flat area and you don't use the back. You use the front 1/3 of any accessory you're using. So you kind of almost just, you know, touching it like that. Well, I happened to catch the corner of the base, and again, these things are very deceiving because, you know, you think, oh, it's over here. You got two hands on the machine, but it caught the corner. And when it did, it flipped it back into my gut. Now, this is almost embarrassing to talk about, but I have to do it because if it saves just one of you, it's worth it. So when I always wear, as you know, I always wear a shop apron when I come into, when I work with tools like the grinder and stuff, I use a canvas one, not a cotton one. I use a cotton one if I'm dealing with paint or something like that. But when I'm dealing with anything that could be potentially hazardous, you know, a lather, I always wear my canvas shop apron. Well, what happened was that flipped around. You can see what it did here. It ripped into the shop apron, ripped into my work shirt, ripped through that, and I wear a sweatshirt underneath, caught into the sweatshirt and locked up. Now, here's why I bring this up. Other than feeling like a fool or kind of foolish for a couple seconds, I was uninjured other than ripping up my my apron, my shirt, and, you know, putting a few holes in my sweatshirt underneath. But I had 3 layers that this went through. Now, 2 things I wanted to tell you really important. Number 1, these cup brushes you always have to be careful with. You know, when they talk about injuries in the shop, you hear a lot of things about table saws, things like that. That's because a lot of those people get injured where they have to go to the emergency room. I bet you there are more injuries with angle grinders and other things like that, but people don't go to the emergency room because, you know, you get ripped up, you get cut up, you patch it up yourself. But what happened with this here, now if I was on the West Coast or someplace warm and I was wearing a t-shirt, when you do, you know, a lot of guys do, when you're in a hot shop, what are you going to do? I always wear work shirt. I always wear a shop apron. That's always, and always wear eye protection. These eye protection, always, they're never, I never come into the shop without them. So it saved me. If I was wearing a t-shirt, this thing could have disemboweled me. You know what I mean? When it flipped around. But here's the thing. The important thing, when you're looking to buy one of these, number one, I never like the barrel grip. It's too wide of a grip here, okay? I always like a thinner grip, so consider, next time you're buying one of these, consider the rat tail design. Really nice. Number two, trigger switch. Stay away from the ones that you turn the switch on and hold it here, because now that's always running. When this thing flipped around, my hand came off the trigger, it stopped instantly. If I had one of those stupid switches up here that you turn on and you hold it here, then I would have been in a worse way. Always go for the trigger or paddle switch, okay? Just two things that I hope that'll save you, or if you're in the market for one, get the smaller handle, easier to grip, and a trigger switch. And always wear a shock apron.
Okay, so that's it for our public safety announcement. So I hope you do take heed to that. Learn from my mistakes or my experience on this. Today we're going to be starting on the drill, the half-inch drill. Remember, last week we did the drill stand. Let me show you. Last week we did this beautiful number 60 Black & Decker bench drill stand. Came out absolutely beautiful, right? It's like new. Now we're going to be working on the drill that goes on. Okay, so here it is, the half-inch Black & Decker heavy-duty electric drill. And these were, like I said, heavy-duty. They were made for continuous duty, production plants, things like that. This one here is in beautiful shape, but we got a few things to do. First of all, you could see here, it's got some years of, wear and tear as far as being outside, and you don't know what conditions it's been in. But here, we had to remove the chuck. Now, that's the first thing. The chuck was jammed up. It was frozen, and there was a couple issues with the chuck. Now, I was trying to look up. This is a Jacobs chuck. They used a heavy-duty Jacobs chuck on here. I was looking for a way to get this chuck off. Now, most chucks with electric drills, to get them off, you insert a hex key in here, and then you tap it with a hammer, just because it's regular threads, and it will spin off, okay? I didn't know, I looked it up. I went to the Jacobs website. This is a number 34 chuck, which is very common. It's 0 to 1/2 inch capacity, but to take this off, you use what they call wedges, because this has a Jacobs taper. I'll show you when we take it off. And wedges are nothing more than two pieces of steel that are shaped in a wedge that go between, and when you push it like this, it expands and because you have to pull this off direct. Just so happens when I gave it 3 taps, because I wasn't sure if it was threaded or not, 3 light taps with an Allen key in there, and it popped off. So we were able to get the chuck off. Let me show you about the chuck. Okay, now you can see here is the chuck. Okay, now look at this. We got, like I said, there are issues. Now sometimes, let me tell you about the thing about lubrication, okay? Lubrication is a funny subject, because here you can see, like, this is a dried on, almost like a grease. And if you see, I'm using a dental tool here. This was great to have, but you could see here that it's popping off. But you see what happens to grease, or certain oils and things like that. You see that? Now what happens is grease loosens up with heat. Let me show you about grease. Now, when it comes to lubrication, we have different grades of lubrications, different viscosities. It goes from a kerosene, which is a super light oil, all the way up to a grease, which is, but they're all basically lubricants, When you say, well, why aren't I using oil? Because it flows better than grease. Well, grease has its own properties, and when they use for bearings and things like that, if you look at the grease here, it stays put. You see, there's a little piece of grease here. This is regular automotive grease for bearings, things like that. This is a synthetic grease, which is a little bit better because it stays. It keeps its viscosity throughout the temperatures. Now, I'm going to show you. I'm going to light this little piece of cotton up, and I'm going to show you what happens when heat is applied to grease. Now we just lit up that little piece of cotton here, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to show you. I'm using aluminum too, and I'm going to show you what happens with what happens to the grease when it heats up. Okay, you can see here it only took a little while before that became a liquid. You see how it turned into a liquid,
And what happens is when it turns to a liquid, that's when it does your lubrication. But then when it starts to cool down, it thickens up again. But here's the problem. You see here? Now when you get that grease, you see what's happening? It cooled down a little bit. Now it becomes like this sticky. And after it keeps heating and cooling, this stuff becomes like a tar, which is almost what grease has tar properties because they're all from a petroleum derivative. Now, when heat is applied slowly, like a bearing, it's gonna happen slowly. But if it happens, like if something gets real hot, like a torch, watch how quickly. And you can see what happens, obviously. Grease does get flammable after a while, but let me show you. See now how liquidy it is because of that heat that was applied? Now watch how quick it cools down. Aluminum will cool quickly. And what does it turn into? It turns into like a gooky and back into almost like a tar-like substance. So that's why grease is used. It stays put. It stays in the bearings and things like that. If you put regular oil, it would splash out, things like that. So that's the grease property. Now, a good quality grease, even after it's heated up, if cooled down, still keeps its lubrication properties. Listen to this. Pretty cool. Okay, so now you can see it still has its lubrication properties, but that's why we use the grease. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to have to, when this dries after so many years, it loses some of its lubricating properties and becomes a very sticky, hard-like substance that you got to remove. So that's why we always usually have problems. Chucks are made to be serviced because after a while, with the heat and everything and that grease, you could see this is locked up. It'll turn a little bit, but then it gets locked up. Another problem I have with this particular key here, the key doesn't engage the chuck properly. You see here, when I put the key in here, it only engages the tip. That should almost seat down. So that means this sleeve has slipped down a little bit, needs to be pressed back. And so we're going to take it apart, service it. Now, there are great videos on YouTube on how to do that. So I'm just going to take this apart and I'll show you what the inside looks like. The main thing is you have to remember what jaw goes where. Now, to take apart the chuck, the best way to do it is to press this through. This is a sleeve. This rotating sleeve here gets pressed off. Now, I used to save all kinds of metal when I used to work, and this was one piece I saved. I don't even know why I saved it, but this almost fits perfectly here. So all I have to do is take it on the lathe, take a little bit off of here, and I'll have a perfect thing to press this out, and then we'll go to the dake. Now here we go. Look at this nice little tool we made here. This is cast iron, and you can see here how this will fit. See that? Just a little bit of a slip. Now we're going to put this socket over here, press it out. Let's go to here we are, everybody's favorite, the dake. We don't need a lot of pressure for this. You could actually use an arbor press, but let's pop that out. Okay, it should. There we go. You see, it's not a lot of pressure to pop this out. There we go. Just loosen it up and now pop right. Now this is what happens to it. This is why this chuck hasn't been able to move, because you know that grease just locks up in there. And you can see they are marked here. You can see there's a little number 3 there, right? That's for 3, drawer number 3. Number 2 here for drawer number 2. And drawer number 1 here. Now I'll show you how to look at them when we'll take them. Okay, so here's how you identify the jaws. Here's drawer number 1. You can see that number 1 there. And if you look at the bottom here, you can see there's a full thread plus a half. Jaw number 2, see over here, has a full thread, but no half. It's just a full thread. And jaw number 3 over here, this one, has a half a thread. So that's how you tell. Okay, now you can see here, you see the what happens, what we were talking about with the grease and how it locks up. And that, like I said, it wasn't working. And all this over here, look at that. Now, you might want to take something and go over to the wire wheel or something. You do not touch any of this with a wire wheel. Ice cream stick. Cut a piece off like this. Okay. Get a nice sharp area. And just use an ice cream stick and a little elbow grease and get all this out of here. And use solvent. Acetone makes a good solvent. And we'll come back when this is all cleaned up. Okay, everything's cleaned up, ready to go back together. We put all the jaws back in, cleaned everything up. We'll match them up. Now, if you look in here, you see the scrapes and cuts in there. That's bad news, and there's really nothing you could do with that, but we'll see. We're going to clean it, but we might be in trouble with that, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, we finished, rebuilt the chuck. Look how nice this works. Now, remember how jammed it was, and listen. Can you hear that? It's just beautiful, isn't it? And for lubrication, I used my 50/50 automatic transmission fluid and red grease. I like that. But here it is. We have the chuck serviced. We cleaned up the key. You can see it's an original Jacobs key here, number 3. Okay, and you can see it fits much better now. Remember before it wouldn't fit in all the way, but now it engages the teeth the way it should be. It just rides much closer, much better. And now the only thing is, you know, like I said, we have a damaged, that should be smooth as silk in there. So it's been scratched, damaged. I don't know what happened in there. Let me show you the shaft of the drill. Now I cleaned it with acetone and everything, but you could see now we have slight scratches here over here. Now, you know, it'll work. This is where I can ask a question for my old machinist friends who've had this issue before. When you have something that's a little goobered up, what do they do? Do you put any kind of intermittent something in there that when you put the chuck on that, or what do you do? You know, what do you do? You can't, obviously you can't take this down because then you'd have to change the dimensions of the other one. So, you know, this is where the old timers can let me know what they do for something like this. But it will fit on, it will stick on because there's enough surface there to hold it. Now I was hoping to get the whole drill serviced by this episode, but we're running a little bit late. But I want to just show you, I want to give you a sneak peek of something. You see that's on, you know, but I want to show you something here, okay? Something as a sneak peek to give you some hope for next episode, because look at how this is going to come out. You know, this is, obviously I'm just using a little bit of acetone here to dissolve that grease up, but you know how this whole drill is going to come out, right? It's just going to look beautiful when we're finished. So that's for the next episode. One last thing I want to mention, I'm sitting here. You remember this little grease cup that I did before, you know, show you the burnt grease? Well, I got to tell you something. I was about to throw it out, and I just gave it a sniff. Oh, God, it smells like my dad. I know it sounds crazy, but, you know, my dad worked in an oil company for 40 years, and Petro, and petroleum heat and power, and this is what his clothes would smell like. And I got to tell you something. Every time I just, the smell, it's him. And, you know, how many times do you get to smell, you know, your father or something like that from, you know, years back? And I'll tell you, it brings you back. It's amazing. I don't want to throw it away now. I'll probably wind up with cancer smell. Okay, we did a lot today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Well, Monday we'll get that drill back together. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care now. Bye-bye.